Okay, so now for week 2, I want to give you a little bit of just a preview of what we're going to do, and then we're going to upgrade our skills this week for how to write and save queries and do our proof of work. So this week you're going to have part 3 of the querying videos where you're coding along with those based on my instruction and of course based on what that's covering. And then we're going to do our first problem set, part 1. We'll end up doing the cyber chase for 2 weeks before we move on to other topics. Okay? So querying part 3 and the first part of the cyber chase. Okay, so now for our attendance. I'm going to first review our current workflow and then I'm going to upgrade our workflow to give us more functionality and a new way of doing things. So I have open my code space. I have open, in this case, my terminal. My terminal is setting at my repo level, so it's at the root of my repo. It's one of the ways we can say it. And so just to review, I'm going to, oh, right here it is. Let me just actually get rid of this for a minute. So in here, first, let's just talk about what we've learned, right? So what we've learned is to run SQLite from the terminal, and I've been calling it a subsystem. It's really a shell, so that's the first thing we'll upgrade is we'll start talking about this shell that we're running, this SQLite. And what we did last week is we built this directory called querying, and then we did a proof of work, and then we saved our queries through this proof of work. So we're going to upgrade that this week. But if I was just to go back in there and do that, the first thing I would have to do is change my current directory, right? Because if I did SQLite here 3 and I tried to do long list.db, that would not work, right? Even though it would tell me it would work, if I tried to do a select, right, from, let's say, long list, right, I would get an error. And it'd be like, why did that not work? Okay. So then I'd be looking at that and I'd be like, do I see that that's because my current directory was not in where that database was at? And I'm leading you to something we're going to do. So that's why I'm doing this. So now what I'd want to do is get out of the shell because I want to change that. Or I could open up another terminal, but I'll just get out of that. Right? And actually, as part of what I was showing here was the idea of how to quit, right? So I could either quit the way we've done it here, right? Or I could also use the Control plus D, and I think if I did Control D, that would then drop me out of that subsystem, right? You can also do the quit as well. So here's what I'd want to do. I'd want to change to that current directory, right? I'd want to change my current directory to querying. And I showed you how to actually use the tab to get into there. And I could up arrow here and then go ahead and run that same command, run the shell with that database. And I can actually also use my up arrow to select that last one. And now I actually get the output. Okay. So just a review of that, right? So, and then we created a proof of work file. This is where, and I don't even have the mode on. This is just where I had you copy that, right? And then create a file. But we're actually going to walk away from that this week and upgrade our skills related to that. We learned to terminate the line correctly. And let me just show you that because I think I fumbled a little bit in the last one that if I do, because I'm in the subsystem now and I could do Control L to clear that output, but that output is still in my history. If I scroll up, I can see that as well. And I showed you how to create run a new terminal to maybe get rid of that. But what I'm talking about now is if I did something like this and hit enter, that ... greater than is actually a continuation line, right? And so in the instruction, I just showed you how, right, different ways to get out of that. And you can either do it right here, and let's just do a semicolon. And why is that true? Because in this case, the shell says, hey, you didn't terminate the line. And if I do that, I actually get a parse error. So it's not actually the most gentle way, but it's a fine way for now for us to do it. But when you see stuff like this, it can throw you off thinking, oh my God, I made an error. It's okay. But now I'm out of the continuation line. Okay. And then from here, again, Control L, I could get back to clearing that. Okay. So what we also learned, which I'm not going to walk through again, because hopefully you're getting used to this now, is how to do the Git workflow to push your work and your files, which is really your work is your files and your commits, to our GitHub private repos that you have on our organization. And so the reason I put this in here is first, it is part of what we're doing. And I want you to remember, you want to be making all your changes that you're doing for this course here. Don't go directly to GitHub, only to submit your URLs, but don't go, I mean, you can, but it just causes a little bit of a challenge as if you go directly to the repo once it's set up and you try, because you can modify files in here. I just don't recommend it. And the reason is that your source, right? If your source and your origin are different, origin and destination, we call that, it creates what we call conflicts, and there's ways around it, but why deal with it right now if you don't have to? Okay, so this is what we've learned, and along the process we're learning, of course, the whole purpose of doing this is learning how to write SQL statements. And so now, for this week, we're going to upgrade our skills. And in order to do that, I'm going to give you a little bit of a challenge, okay? And this is what I'm going to talk about in this particular video. Okay, I actually should have probably organized these differently. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to create a new folder called W2, okay, and it's at the same level as the W1 in the querying folder, right? So if I was to look here, I want you to create a new folder called W2, right? And now what I want you to do in that folder is I want you to do what we did up here, right? So how would you, in this case, given where the long list is at, and if I wanted to just say, show me everything in the long list, if I created a new folder, then how would I do that? Okay, there's actually multiple approaches. And so first, that's what I want you to see if there's a way you could figure out how to do that. Because I actually showed you how to get the original file. And you might think, well, how about if I just copy it into this new folder? That might be a way. It's not the way I recommend doing it, right? But I want you to think about how you could do it. Okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you pause here and I'm going to have you think about how, now that we have this new W2 folder, that is a different level in the directory structure as the querying one, but we want to run SQLite with with that long list, right, database, and then write this simple query. How would we do that? And again, you don't necessarily, and you could use various ways to accomplish this. Just give this some thought. This will be part of the grade that you get on this reply is for what you did to think about this, because part of what you want to learn in the class like this is how to have, it's like I know how to do X, Y, Z, and now I'm going to learn something new. How do I do that? Not that you have to have the answer. Okay, so I want you to pause here. Take some notes, because when you reply down here, I want you to give me kind of what some of the things you tried. If you were successful, even if you're not successful, I don't give you not less points if you weren't successful. What I give you points on is, did you try? And what did you try? And what did you think about? Or what did you Google? Or what did you ask ChatGPT? Or whatever your favorite LLM is. Okay, pause now. Come back and I'll show you the solution. Okay, so let's just walk through this together. All right, so over here, now that I'm here, right, well, and I've shown you this before, like I would select maybe just this folder, and making sure I don't have a folder already selected, meaning this file, apologize. If I created a new folder here, it'd be at the same level. Okay, cool. Right, so now, and by the way, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here so that I'm not there, right? And I'm going to go ahead and back up one directory. Okay, so now I'm inside here, but in here I'm not, right? So if I just did that change directory W2, or as I've shown you before, open an integrated terminal is the other way you could do that. Now my current folder is, evidently, there it is. Now I have that. But if I did SQLite 3 here, and I did longlist.db, as I kind of tried to preview before, that wouldn't necessarily work. So how would I get this working, right? We know that I saw it before, it didn't. Well, one thing you can do is when you're running this command, you can actually tell the command line, because you're actually saying, here's the command, here's the database. But if it's not in that current subdirectory, you can do ... and then you can say go, so that says go back one folder. And then if I say querying /, I believe this will work. Okay, now let's see if this will work. So select star, right, from long list. So that works. So that the trick there, and it was something we haven't talked about. So you may have, like I said, attempted to, in that case, you know, I'm going to scroll back up to show you. So the way often we're writing commands, we can, if we don't have the database, or in this case the database, there may be other times we use other things, but in that current directory we can say back. So ... says from your current location, from wherever you're at, right? And in this case we're in the W2 subdirectory, back up one directory, find the querying directory, and then reference the long list DB. Okay, so that was how you solved that particular one. Give us in your reply what you tried, you know, what you got from doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here, or actually just clear that for a minute. Okay, so now let's upgrade, right? So now that we've done the challenge, let's actually upgrade the way we are running, saving and running our queries. So where before we were actually just writing them in the command line and then creating that proof of file, now we're actually going to save them in a file, which I think is a really fun way to do it. Okay, so in my instruction, what I say here is, and matter of fact, I just realized I forgot actually in my instruction tell you to create that file. So by the time you will get here, you will see to first create this, what we call the queue. It's just the queue is for queries, and it's going to be in that subdirectory. So you'll see a little different instruction when you come in here, but this is what we're going to do. Okay, so in this W2 directory, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it queue.sql. And so what this does, and you can see the VS Code already knows what this is, and it's the query file. So instead of running it at the command line, I'm going to create a file. And what's great about this, it actually creates some opportunities and some challenges when you're running them, and you'll see that in a minute. But now I could type select, right, star, everything from, right, long list, semicolon. Okay, so now that I have that file, I'm already in the SQLite shell, right? I'm not going to run that, issue those commands on the command line. I'm actually going to run that file. And if you look back over here, I've shown you the command you need to use. Okay, so .read and then the name of the query. So let's go back over, right? So in this case, I am in the right directory. And by the way, notice how it shows me there, which is cool. So I can do .read, right, q.sql. So that's great. Now instead of, you know, if we make a mistake here, we have to figure out how to run it again, which really isn't a big deal. This is more the way you would logically do something like this, or to step up again our skill level. Now what can happen here though is this: if when you're typing it in here, you're saving in the file, let's say you forget something. If I, as an example, did that, and I came down here, I did up arrow to run that in. Let me just clear that, right? Control L. If I hit .read again here, let me see, do I have... Oh, and actually I could show you about that too, but I could just type .read q.sql. Okay. Actually, it should have given me an error there. Huh, I wonder if when you give it, let me just check out something real quick just to see if I have this right. Yeah, no, I'm in that same subdirectory. I'm running the SQLite referencing the other directory. Let's see. Huh, I wonder, actually, this is the first time I've run into this. I wonder if, let's do this. Actually, let's get rid of for a second, though, here. And now let's type .read q.sql. Ah, now I get an error. That's interesting. Now what that says to me is something I just learned, which is that in this case, when we're reading it from a file, evidently the terminator is not as important, right? We know when we're writing it here, we get that continuation line. I'm going to undo this just so I have it. But when I'm writing out of here, I don't have to have it. And maybe that's why that termination, that semicolon, tells the shell that, hey, I've terminated my line, to where when I'm writing it in the file, it doesn't need that. See, I learned something today. I love that. Okay, so let me clear this. I would still, as a good practice, probably put that in there just to have good practice to do it. Okay, and now my point of showing you that, kind of a little around the not directly but indirectly, was the idea that when you're running these query files, right, sometimes it's a little hard to troubleshoot what the issue is. And so sometimes if I'm having a little problem, I will copy that and bring it down into here to look at that output. Okay. Now, the other thing I could do in this file, and there's a couple more things I could actually do that mode, right, box. Okay. So now if I run my query, if I actually read, in this case read means run it, read that file, now it actually is going to read also, run the first line, and then it'll run the second. Awesome, right? Okay. So now we've learned how to create these files, we've learned how to run these files, and now because you're going to be writing multiple queries when you get to the work this week, I'm going to show you how to use comments. Now, in this case, we're using comments, either a line comment or what we call a block comment. But I typically will use, mostly I use line, but sometimes I use block, and I'll show you what I mean by this. So let's say now, and this is, by the way, as you're following along here, let's actually say I wanted to write another query, but I wanted to show I had indeed done the first one, so I could do dash dash space, or just to show, and notice how that goes gray. So now if I come in here and I tried to read that file again, nothing happens, right? Because I've commented out that line, which, by the way, mode is still running because it's on the session. It's running on the session, so it's not there. It's still there, but it just doesn't give me any output. And so now what I could do is I could write another SQL, right? Actually, let's grab the whole thing. And this is the other nice thing, and we could have done this before, but let's say I wanted to select, instead of everything, I wanted to select title, right? So now this one's commented out, so it's not going to run. So now if I do read, now I get that output. So as you're doing the work this week, you'll write a query, get it working, and now I'm going to show you the last step of this is the proof of work file, because we're going to change the way we do that as well. Okay. But what you will be doing is writing multiple queries. Okay, so we're going to use these comment lines in order to comment out the query that you got working and that you created your proof of work from. And this is what I'm about to walk you through. Okay, so now we're going to use another SQLite command called .output, and we're going to do a w2.txt, where before we created that file manually, we're actually going to have the shell command do it for us. But like box, it's going to be in effect until you change it, and that's what we'll do here. So we'll first, let me just show you, then we can come back and talk about it. Okay, so I'm going to show you first in the command itself, right? So in here, right, where I just outputted that, what I do is .output and tell it what's the file I want to output. right? And I even show you here, I want to output whatever I'm about to run into a file, and watch what will happen. And I'll do w2.txt. And so what happens is it creates that file when I do this step. And so now when I do .read q.sql and I hit enter, nothing outputs. But if you come over here, then what you'll see is that creates an the first step created it, right? The dot output says, hey, give me a file, and now whenever you do something, redirect that output to that text file, whatever I do. And now what I'd probably want to do, and you might be wondering, well, why don't you just put it in here? You could. But in order to kind of get used to doing this, I would probably do it manually this week. But I wouldn't mark off if you did. Okay, so let's say we were continuing, we were doing the next query. Then what I'd want to do if I was looking at to make sure I had the query correct and it ran okay, I'd still want to see my output on the terminal. Then I would just do output to now return the standard out, it's called. And if I run this again, then I get that output on the terminal. Okay? Okay. All right, so what you're going to do here, we've upgraded our skills. You're going to actually put this right into practice in this week. And what I want you to do now, you're going to complete the workflow. You're going to commit message week 2 attendance. Now, nobody else sees this but you and I, right? So that's when I look at your post, I'll look at your reply here, and I will also look at here. So you're not, even if you wouldn't do what you kind of normally have done in this class as far as give me the URL. And the reason you wouldn't here is only you and I would see your commit history, okay? And in this case, I just will go review that. But what you will do in the reply, okay, in order to get all the points, is you will talk about if you were successful in my challenge, any other questions or comments you have regarding, the new way we save and run queries and do proof of work files, because this is just upgrading our skill base. All right, I hope you, I know this it takes some time to learn, but honestly, you're building some wonderful muscle memory. Congratulations. I look forward to seeing your replies. And like I said, when I grade it, I will also look at your commits. Even though you haven't submitted your URL, it's something I can go look at. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Have a good one.